Good evening. I will call this Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018 to order. My name is Janet Godwin, and I want to thank those in the audience, those watching on television, and those keeping track via Twitter feed for joining us tonight. At the table with me, to my right, Superintendent Steve Murley and Directors Rethina Malone, Phil Hemingway, Lori Rotland, J.P. Clausen, Shine Eyestone, Paul Ressler, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. And before we move into community comment, I just wanted to say a word of condolences to the families in Kentucky who were affected by the horrific school shooting today. I know all of us here send our thoughts and best wishes for those families at this time. And with that, we'll move into community comment, and we'll start with Jackson Mullenix. And following Jackson, we'll have Amber Stutzman.
So my name is Jackson Mullenix. I'm from Lone Tree. I'm an FFA member and student there, and I'm the president of Lone Tree, and I'm the vice president of Southeast Iowa, so I'm a Southeast District Officer. And I just wanted to talk about FFA and what it's meant to me as you guys think about having an agriculture program. So obviously I'm not from a farm, and a lot of your students wouldn't be. And so I just want to speak on behalf of those students who are females not from a farm. FFA is so much more diverse than it has been in the past. There's over 600, almost 650,000 members across the nation. So our organization is so diverse. It's the largest agricultural youth organization in the nation. So I just want to speak on behalf of that. And also, agriculture is our most valuable industry here. I think the statistic is 2 out of every $3 is spent on agriculture. So obviously, especially being in Iowa, agriculture is very important. And then the opportunities in FFA. So there are so many opportunities in FFA. These are really what characterizes our organization. And I can tell you the skills that I've gained from those are unparalleled to any other organization that I've been a part of. There are so many leadership conferences, competitions that you can be a part of, and that's really why our organization is so diverse, because there are so many things you can be a part of. It's more than being a farmer, it's being a scientist, it's being a policymaker, it's whatever you want to do. So when you're deciding this, keep in mind that even though your students probably won't be from a farm or have the agriculture background, that there is a value to an agriculture program and FFA. And just today, I took an interview for an internship internationally, and that's an opportunity brought to me through FFA. This week, a student from Lone Tree who graduated last year got back from South Africa because she's a state officer, and that's what their trip was. We've had students go to Haiti. The opportunities are endless. And another thing is the community that's in FFA. That's really what attracts a lot of people. I've made so many friends from being a part of this organization, and meeting people who are like-minded, who are driven, tenacious, and are ready to be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's what's really incredible. The people that I've met through there, relationships that I'll cherish forever. And I've met the vice president of John Deere, had a 30-minute conversation with him. You meet very important people through FFA. And another thing, the resources that are available to the educators, the students, endless. Again, there's so many scholarships available, so many places you can go, things you can do, that there's really, FFA is for anyone. And when you say that, it truly is. My parents, when I came home after probably 2 weeks in their freshman year, they were like, who is this kid? Because we definitely didn't raise him to be someone interested in farming. So do you guys have any questions, or can I answer anything?
Thank you, Jackson,
Perfect.
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Next up, Amber Stutzman, and following Amber, we have Dan Black.
My name is Amber Stutzman. I'm from Iowa City, originally from Indiana, and I'm a product of a quality FFA agriculture education program. Now in the real world and the workforce, I can honestly say that FFA and my ag education experience prepared me better for what I'm doing today than pretty much anything else I came across during my education, predominantly in soft skills. I've worked with some interns over the past couple years, and I feel like our young students are lacking in soft skills. And the exposure that FFA gives in terms of public speaking, simple things that aren't really being taught in a classroom setting. I can honestly say that I wouldn't be who I am today, nor where I am today without my ag education FFA experience. Not only was I exposed to national travel, but I was able to travel internationally as well. And through all the activities I was involved in and the opportunities I was presented with, scholarships came my way. And obviously paying for college isn't cheap. So having another leg up on my peers when it came to scholarship time, that was pretty important in my education path. So I think this is something that the Iowa City School District students and community is really missing out on, not having that. And Jackson really hit it home. You don't have to be from a farm to take advantage of the opportunities that FFA provides. You know, it's more than just cows, sows, and plows, and I think that is often overshadowed. There's more to agriculture than raising crops and livestock. So in terms of soft skills and potential career opportunities, I think this is something that the school district could greatly benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dan, and then following Dan, we will have Randy. I apologize for not getting your name right. Lackender. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the board for entertaining this concept of entering into this program. My name is Dan Black. I'm a lifelong Johnson County resident, graduate of Iowa City High School in 1967, and I've been involved with agriculture my whole life. And I can tell you this, I wish I had had the opportunity to have FFA and vocational agriculture when I was at City High. I did have a 4-H experience, but this is an absolutely wonderful program, and I don't even know what quite to say after these two young people just spoke. I think it speaks volumes of what vocational ag and FFA can do and affect on our young people. But you know, I guess to my point, you know, when we live in a metropolitan area, I think we tend to forget a little bit about agriculture. It gets put a little bit on the back burner, and this certainly brings it to the forefront and brings incredible opportunities to young people. You know, agriculture just, you know, helps provide such a boost to our economy. There was the quote on the $2 to $1 spending. You know, it increases tax base. Agricultural is so important, and fostering these young people, I believe, is just absolutely critical to, you know, a vibrant future. And I do think there's all kinds of opportunities for urban youth, rural youth, male, female, in food production areas in this area. I mean, you don't have to look any farther than our farmers markets, the CSAs that are in operation locally, the community-supported agricultural businesses. You can look at what the Johnson County supervisors have done out at the Poor Farm and are doing, expanding and growing that in regards to direct production. There's just all kinds of those sort of opportunities too. I think, you know, that, and I think it also, and it was, I think, alluded to here too, that previously, that it also leads to other opportunities. I mean, agriculture isn't just, you know, farming, a traditional production farming, but I mean, it relies, moves on to engineering and chemistry and banking, and there's just a whole host of opportunities that directly pay off of agriculture. So I'd just like to ask you to try to get behind this program, do it, understand that there's a ton of community support out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So Randy, and following Randy, we have Mike Lehman.
Word. When Mr. Hemingway asked me to be on this committee, I jumped at it. I'm a third generation farmer south of Iowa City on a century farm. I also own Lackador Incorporated. I have the 5th generation coming up on the farm, and that's what I'm looking at. I want those kids to be farmers, and having the chance of having some education, because it's a lot more important than it was for me 40, 50 years ago. It's so high tech now. There's so much more involved. And I look at it, and there's just so many things that I would like to see in that. And I would say I'll be the first one, that Lackador Incorporated would, to give a scholarship if such program was in place. I think that's that important. And if you look around and you all the different backgrounds, what do we all have in common? And it's food. And it doesn't come from a grocery store. And it comes from a farmer. And there's a lot of us out there in Johnson County, and we're proud, and I'm just happy to be part of this, and hope you decide that we can maybe get a start in the Iowa City School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Mike Lehman, and then Katie McWhorter. Again, apologies if I got the name wrong. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Mike Lehman. I'm wearing several hats tonight. I'm an active farmer involved in family farm operations. I work for Big Country Seeds that supplies agricultural and lawn inputs. Also provide crop insurance for area producers through Farm Bureau. I'd like to commend Board Member Hemingway for his editorial in the paper supporting the need for vocational agricultural curriculum. In the Iowa City area and the state of Iowa definitely changed over time. Growing up, most of my friends had grandparents or relatives that farmed, and people had some connection and understanding to farming. Today, many children assume that their food comes from the grocery store. Grant Wood and Alexander elementary schools are built on land that my family owned and operated. I attended a one-room country schoolhouse that was located in the vicinity of Sycamore Mall and Earl May Garden Center. I only had to walk uphill one way to school. I didn't farm with horses, but I do have the first tractor my dad purchased in 1942, and I still use it. Opportunities in farming agriculture have also changed. You don't have to be the one producing a bushel of corn or soybeans to be involved. By providing an agricultural curriculum, you can encourage students to become a majority participants in the state of Iowa's largest source of income. It's been said that 75% of employment in the state of Iowa is tied to agriculture. Education needed to inform students about the past, present, and future impacts of genetically enhanced food production. They can learn how qualities and quantities have been improved through scientific discoveries and implementation. Agriculture needs engineers to design manufacturing equipment to plant, cultivate, and harvest production efficiently. It might involve developing GPS systems, seed placement monitors, or installing and service of the same. There are careers in designing farm buildings, grain storage, as well as needs to be met in advancement of drainage and irrigation to make food more productive to feed the world. It might be in the field of chemistry to develop new uses of grain, adding to the production of ethanol, fructose, and breakfast cereals. It might be in the field of genetics involving plant breeding or livestock production. It might be in biology research or pharmaceutical discoveries and animal health products. There are unlimited career opportunities in the agricultural sector of financing and sales. I know Dwayne has already got the ball rolling here by using goats on some of the elementary schools. I would encourage you to start an agricultural curriculum to make students aware of the opportunities that they might otherwise never know existed. The Iowa City Community Schools is more than just Iowa City. Iowa City has been designated a city of literature. I would challenge you to become known as the community of agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Katie?
Good evening. My name is Katie McWhorter. I was asked to be on this committee because I was a high school agricultural education instructor at Columbus Junction for the school district for 9 years. And what a diverse school district that was, and very few farmers, even as rural as that school was. When asked to be on this committee, I got very excited because I always thought that there needed to be more ag ed programs, especially in the corridor area. There's so many resources available for students to be able to job shadow, to be able to experience the diversity of ag here in the corridor area. They've talked about FFA. Understand that FFA Ag Education program is a Venn diagram. So you have the FFA component, but also the classroom component and the supervised agricultural experience program that all students are expected to have. When I say a supervised agricultural experience program, it teaches skills such as record keeping, goal setting, those soft skills that Mrs. Stutzman talked about there earlier. Other skills so vital to our young people, the networking opportunities. So typically when you have schools, it's, I'm from Washington, so it was Washington versus Mount Pleasant. You never interacted, but with the ag kids, those networking with not only the students there, but the other ag instructors. Really, ag education makes the stuff learned or taught in science and math relevant for a lot of kids to connect those competencies. And I always said that if you could have told me about, it wasn't pi r square, and to find out the amount of bushels in a bin. If you could have linked everything to agriculture, I probably would have done a lot better in school. But there's just so many valuable skills that ag education brings to students at all levels. And so I encourage you to very strongly consider this for the Iowa City School District. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your comments tonight, coming out and sharing your perspectives. Very, very helpful. With that, we'll move into our consent agenda.
I'd like to pull consent agenda item number 9, the benefit enrollment system.
Do you want to give an update on bills, Phil, before we vote on the agenda?
Sure. Lori and I went through the bills this period. We spent $3,112,000 and 334,378 were on Go Bond projects. Something that we'll take up in our operations committee is we had in the month of December $15,000 worth of taxi fees associated with students that are in the homeless shelter and things like that. So I think there's opportunities there, but we need to discuss that in operations. A couple of other questions on some contracts, but those have been answered, and so everything seems to be in order. Thank you.
I move that we approve the consent agenda except for item 9.
Second again.
Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Now we'll move to board work and the equity committee update.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yolanda Rivera, and I'm the chair of the Equity Committee, and we're here with not all of our members could be here tonight, but some of us are here to present to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you. I am a mother of an alum, an Iowa School District alum, and 2 children who are still currently in the Iowa School District system. And we are very, very excited to be here working with you. The committee is an advisory board, and we are comprised of a very diverse group of members. We are working alongside board member J.P. Clausen and Cersei Stumbo in an effort to all reach our goals of equity in our district. We are intentionally a diverse group. We try very hard to have people representing different aspects of our community. We have parents, we have students. Our group is currently growing. We're going to have hopefully some more students, members of the schools, join our committee. We are all concerned about equity, but we each have passions that we bring and ideas that we bring to the board. Some of us have particular interest in racial equity, sexual orientation, women's rights, students with disabilities. We each have a passion, and we each have a set of eyes that we use to look at the issues currently that the district is currently dealing with. We hope that our diversity and our different perspectives can help you work together throughout the year to find common solutions to maybe some of the issues that our district is encountering. Over the past years, we have found that the group has changed in the way we run our meetings. It used to be that we would deal with the issues that we had at hand at the moment, and sometimes we meet once a month for 2 hours, and sometimes those 2 hours weren't enough. We would be talking for 2, 3, 4 hours at times, and not even be able to reach everything that we thought we needed to talk about. So we are trying to find a way, and we are hoping we found a way to be able to focus on long-term goals, not just the issues we have at hand at the moment. We had a couple of years ago, we had a chance to sit down with the board at a education committee meeting, and we worked through the strategic plan, the strategic goals, and then we had another opportunity to sit down and work at a work session through the comprehensive equity plan. And this was very eye-opening because we figured we have what we needed. We have the tools. We have a very comprehensive equity plan that we just need to follow, and we can hopefully work with this in a more systematic way. We struggled on how it was gonna get used. We didn't always know, we weren't always clear of who owned the comprehensive equity plan and who was responsible for it. So we hope that we can work together and work through the comprehensive equity plan and work with you and the administration to find long-term solutions to our issues.
Hi, my name is Brooke Griffin. I work with many of the secondary students in the district with community programs. Given what Yolanda was starting to explain, and respecting all the time and energy that we know that you put into considering the myriad of issues in front of the district, we felt that what we were doing to solve the challenges that she talked about would probably be very helpful to you as well as you develop your plans leading the district to equitable outcomes. In particular, the idea is that we're learning a lot about how to use data, look at data, present that data as part of the process of monitoring the equity plans. We also are learning a lot about how to simply make discussions happen in face of other arising hot topics. And we felt that doing some of the legwork in our committee, using the diverse perspectives that we have on the committee, would help, doing some of that work in our meetings would help get more information in front of you as you then dig into it during your meetings.
Hi, I'm Jane Finch. I'm a parent of 2 students in the district. So we looked at what it means to monitor the comprehensive equity plan. What do we know about the students in protected classes? How are they doing? How do we know it? How are we measuring this? What are we doing about what we know? And how is that going? And how do we know that? In terms of reviewing the data, it's key that the data be disaggregated. I can't stress that enough for any of this to be meaningful for us to understand any of this. There are many types of data, standardized tests, achievement data, experience data, for instance, the FAST data. But again, the data that is available to us needs to be disaggregated.
Hi, I'm Cersei Stumbo with Westwind Education Policy, and we are supporting the Implicit Bias and Equity Project. And through that, we're supporting the Equity Committee. And so I've had the opportunity to work with them as they've been thinking through how they go about monitoring it, the equity plan, and they wanted to give you an example. This is not to get into the discussion about the example, but to give you an example of what it's been meaning for them. And it's actually related to the data being understandable. So one of the things that you've done a great job with is asking for more and better data over the years. And so you have a very comprehensive annual progress report that comes out each year that you dug into a few months ago when it came out, and this is from that. So it's an example of some of the discipline data that the committee wanted to really dig into and look at. And so as they did that, this was useful and kind of tough to get through. So they were thinking, like, what are some of the things they might want to particularly pull out and focus on? And in one case was this question of office referrals for defiance, insubordination, and noncompliance. So there's a line in there, quite a bit of data, looks like there's something important happening in it. But in order to really make sense of it, they needed some additional data, and they needed to see it differently. So they asked those questions, and then they were able to get back from me and from Kingsley, the administration, another way of looking at that. And so now here what we did is we said, all right, we know the proportion of students who were referred to the office for defiance, insubordination, and noncompliance. We know that by race. And we also know the proportion of the population of students. And when you put those two together is where you can start to see where there's some disparities in what you would expect to see as an outcome. So the fact that they took what was given and then asked that next level of questions made it a much more understandable challenge that then they could ask the next level of questions about. So again, back to what Jane said, how do we know what's happening with our students in protected classes? As an equity committee, they feel like that's their charge, and so they can do that on your behalf. How do we know it? What is our district doing? That really is, how is your administration implementing? What are the plans that they're putting in place to achieve the goals that you have? And how is it going? How will we know it? And then what they've decided is to come up with a schedule, because we can predict when some important data is going to come out and important questions are going to come up. So with that, Charlie.
I'm Charlie Eastham. I'm a member of the Equity Committee and parent of 3 past members of the students in the district, quite long past. Before I get into my part of the presentation, I have a really bad habit of going off script. Could I ask the board to take a very short and helpful, I think, pop quiz? How many board members have read the equity plan in its 7-page entirety? Would you mind indicating that? You think you have, Lori? Okay. Well, that's a good start. That's a good start. I think we would ask the board at this point in your careers as board members and continuing as board members to go ahead and take some time to read the plan. It's not that long. It doesn't take you all night to do it. But it is important, I think, for board members to understand what the plan actually says and what its overall strategy is. So what is the Equity Committee, what have we been doing ourselves, and what are we going to ask you to do with us to go forward in implementing the equity plan? The first thing we did, we've worked on the last few months, is we developed a schedule ourselves for reviewing the equity plan progress at our monthly meetings. As you know, we meet once a month, the second Wednesday. Sometimes I have been responsible for having 4-hour meetings. Just want to say that. And the second thing we've done, and we are doing, we're extending invitations, hopefully in a timely manner, to the administration staff, to our monthly meetings, to review data relevant to specific areas of the equity plan. And I would like to say that I think the administration has made a very good faith, strong effort to provide data that we've tried to request in a timely way, and to have good, earnest discussions about what that data means. And I personally appreciate the administration for doing that. And we're also offering to work with you as a school board at your second meetings of the month, the fourth Tuesday of every month, in a way of working together to implement the equity plan. We actually have proposed a schedule for doing that. And the schedule's on your displays now. In February, we would propose working with you at a meeting on Objective 3 to look at discipline disparities, and the second meeting in February to look at Objective 1, hiring plans. Then in March, to look at Objective 3 for achievement data. April, Objective 2, community engagement and awareness issues, which are actually really interesting and I think will be more timely as we go forth this year. In May, we need to look at the Objective 4 curriculum, an area which I think we haven't done as much focus as we probably should be doing. In June, Objective 3, English language learning programs and the experience of students in those programs. July, Objective 3, graduation rates. Good time to look at those is in the summer after graduation. And then in August, Objective 1, hiring and data. Then we have a slightly different version of this schedule. If you do, I know you have other things to do at board meetings, but in February, if we can't do 2 board meetings with you, we'd like to ask for at least 1 board meeting where we look at Objective 1 relevant data for hiring plans. Then in March, look at perhaps your second meeting in March, look at Objective 3 achievement data, and then on down the line there. And the idea here is that we're proposing a definite schedule, asking to come to board meetings and discuss issues with you, with administration also in terms of they're providing data that we can look at in advance and have some ideas about what that data actually means and what other data we may want to obtain. So that's our overall major kind of request tonight. We hope you find it helpful.
Well, first off, I want to thank the committee for all the hard work that they do, and I've been to a couple of them, and they're very productive. And I think what you're asking for, as far as having at least one meeting a month, is very reasonable. And I would even go one further and say that we've got enough seats. I would recommend that we provide the Equity Committee a seat at the table every meeting to make sure that we stay on track. And when there are issues with equity, that we can be corrected and that can be brought to our attention. Is that something that the committee would be interested in?
Since our put upon chair, Yolanda, would probably be doing a lot of those meetings, I might let her speak to that.
And I think you could do it in rotation.
Sure.
I know, Charlie, you're here at most of all the meetings anyway.
Well, thank you.
We could get you a seat closer in front. You could hear a little better. We might get you even a more comfortable chair. I'm just putting that out there. I think you're doing tremendous work, and we need your assistance.
I just thank you for all the work you've done, and just to piggyback on what Phil said, if you choose not to have that seat at the table, we usually will have Kingsley or JP here, so you will be represented on that.
And I really appreciate that this is a schedule, which is nice, and then it's systemic so that we are focused on the long game. And because I know we're always there's hot topics that are going to come up, and it's going to dominate a lot of our time. And I think this can be a way to kind of keep us disciplined and focused on those long-term systemic things. And it's, frankly, I really appreciate the work you're doing, because it takes it off of us, and it just really, I think, helps us see things in a different light, and it's much appreciated.
Is it possible for you to send us that presentation because it had the schedule embedded in there and I just want more time to review it? I do appreciate you all coming tonight.
And one just comment from me again. I'll join my colleagues in thanking you for all of the hard work that you're doing on such an important goal in our strategic plan, and I appreciate how well fleshed out it is in the equity plan. We just had a retreat a couple Saturdays ago, and we talked about, as we are doing agenda setting, making sure that we reserve time for our district's most important topics. And I think this proposal is a way of us doing that and making sure that we reserve the time that we need to make sure that we're making the progress, appropriate progress on one of our most critical strategic initiatives. So thank you for the proposal, and appreciate your time tonight very much for coming and presenting. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, teaching and learning. This is a great section of our agenda tonight, along with everything else. We've got 3 big reports in front of us. The first is the Iowa Assessment Report.
All right, I'm going to just share a little information. Hopefully you had time to kind of go through the reports that were uploaded to the board docs, and this was a request of the board. Typically this information we share in the fall when we give you the annual progress report, but you asked for the information that relates to our fall assessment data. And you know, this report I think shows you that there are 100 different ways you can slice and dice this data and look at it. But kind of as evidenced from the Equity Committee, there are a lot of data points in the district that we need to be looking at. And we need to always keep this in perspective, that this is representative of 2 days in October that the kids took this multiple choice standardized test, and doesn't always tell the whole picture, obviously, of what's happening in the district. But as we're looking through the data, you'll notice a couple different ways that it can be represented. Sometimes you'll see the data represented by the National Standard Score. So this is one example. And that score is kind of likened to a yardstick that we might measure students' height. And we would expect that as the students grow throughout the year, their height continually increases. So you see the National Standard Score from 3rd grade to 4th to 5th, all the way up to 11th grade. Generally, you'll see that the National Standard Score increases on average. And you'll also notice in this chart in particular that the district outperforms the AEA and the state in our average National Standard Score. And that's, you know, obviously something that we're very proud of. But we know that doesn't tell the whole story. That average, we know, can be skewed by kids at the very top. You know, we have 30% of our students score in the top 10% of the percentiles in Iowa assessment. So we certainly have a strong group at the top. But we have our challenges as well. You'll also see a report that talks about growth. And just as I said, we expect students to grow from year to year to year. You'll find a chart here that shows how the students grow from 3rd to 4th grade, 4th to 5th, 5th to 6th, and all the way through 9th to 10th grade. So you'll see again that the average score, the average increase or the average gain that a student makes from year to year in the Iowa City District is outperforming the state and the nation in almost every grade and in the subjects that are reported as well. So we have students on average that are higher than the state and the nation, and then our growth is also higher than the state and the nation almost all the way through. The other part of this story, though, is when we talk about proficiency. So proficiency is really just looking at the students who were able to meet a benchmark. And the benchmark was established in 2000 when No Child Left Behind first came. And they looked at the National Standard Score that a child at the 41st percentile would have reached at that time. And they set that kind of as a benchmark. So kind of when you go on a ride at the fair and it says you have to be this tall to ride this ride, that's kind of the benchmark. So it's asking what percent of our kids in each grade are meeting that benchmark for that grade. And you see here that, you know, are flirting around the mid-70s, all the way up to the 80s. But when you look at the proficiency, we'll see that we start to notice that we aren't performing as well as the state and the AEA in our comparison group. So we start to see that obviously we have students that are in the low performing group that we need to be paying attention to, and we certainly are. Then you'll see these proficiency scores in another chart that shows you the disaggregated data that the Equity Committee has been asking for. And it looks at our subgroups, and it shows us what percent of each subgroup has achieved that proficiency, that low mark. And we look at that, and we understand that we have a lot of subgroups that are not performing where they need to be, and not at all where we'd like them to be. We know this isn't because of a lack of desire or a lack of urgency. Our district understands the need to increase. It's not because of a lack of effort. Our staff are working hard every day to impact this, but we obviously haven't found that magic mixture of resources, time, talent, professional development, whatever it takes to impact the students as they're coming into our district. The other thing I do want to point out when you're looking at these charts is in 13 and 14, we were able to get information that included just the students who were here for a full academic year prior to the test. And starting in 15-16, when No Child Left Behind started to go away, we weren't able to get that information any longer. So from the last three columns, you'll kind of notice that there's been a dip between 14-15 and 15-16. Some of that can be attributed to the fact that in 15-16 and on up, we are providing you information with the students, whether they were here a year, 10 years, 2 months, or 2 days ahead of the testing. They were all included. Where in the past, students had to have been here a full academic year before the results were included. So we know that we have students who are entering our school system in August, ahead of the October date. Some are entering a week ahead of the date. Some entering not even speaking English. And we're putting the test in front of them, and we're including that information in here. So I think that can be some of the answer as to why you see the dip in the last 3 years, but still doesn't address the big question of how can we really address the low-performing subgroups that we have. So that's a quick summary of the different charts, kind of an explanation of that, and I guess I'll open it up for a discussion.
Well, I've got a few questions. And I'll start by saying, Mark Twain said there's a white lie, a bold lie in statistics. And this is a snapshot, and obviously we had a bad hair day. But when you look at the trends everywhere from 2013 to 2013-14 to 2017-18, we're going the wrong direction. And some of our vulnerable or protected populations are trending down at twice the rate of the rest of the population. And that's we've tried the RAM model, we're trying this, and what are your suggestions going forward? Now, I've tried to make it a board goal that we have more parent involvement. I mean, parents are their children's first teachers. Are we doing enough with getting parents involved in that? And I guess I'll just make some of my comments and that. But also, do we have any correlation between attendance and scores or rates of growth that way? And also with taking this, what's the incentive for the student? When they take it, I can understand with like a 3rd and 5th grader, they want to please you and that, you give it to them. But when you get into junior high and high school and it's an assessment, they know going in, it's not going to affect anything on their report card or anything that way. What's the incentive for the student to perform? And and that. And also, I'm just concerned that with our technology, we're allowing, and I think a lot of, you know, with so much of what comes up is, you know, we've allowed cell phones into our schools, and they're disruptive, and don't think they're helping that way. And you know, this year we switched over to Chromebooks, and there's some issues with that technology. And you know, on the reading scores, we don't test for dyslexia. Dyslexia can be as high as 10% of the population. I know myself personally, I have dyslexia. When I went to school, I went to our district sent me to the reading clinic at Seashore Hall, and was able to, with the help of a grad student there, Janet Kendall, with phonics and whole word, was able to get proficient at reading, and that was helping. If we're not testing for dyslexia, and then we've got a large percentage of our students that can't read, they're not going to do well on math, they're not going to do well on social studies, they're not going to do well on science. And is that something we should be doing? So I know I'm throwing a lot of it out at you, but if you could respond to any of that, if that's on your radar.
First of all, I would just appreciate Diane for providing the report tonight, and go back and echo one of the things that I think is important to say. First of all, we're happy with some of our results, but we definitely have areas that we know that we need to improve upon. And I feel like we're working extremely hard, and I would just go back and commend our teachers, our instructional coaches, our building principals for the work that they've entertained and dug into specifically over the last couple of years as the early literacy legislations come through. We've gotten better around our NTSS processes and procedures. We've expanded our literacy and math time allotments to 2.5 hours and 75 minutes respectively. Within that, we've provided new interventions, so children are getting core instruction, just like I mentioned, the amount of minutes. In addition, really high quality research-based interventions. I feel like we continue to go down the checklist of things that we know that the research is suggesting that we're doing. Intervening on the behalf of students, progress monitoring on the behalf of students, looking at our data on a regular basis. So every universal screening period after every universal screening period 3 times a year, we're looking at that data. It's disaggregated by subgroups, and we are trying to match interventions that way. We're progress monitoring students in math and reading. That's common now across the board. So I do feel like there's a lot of good things happening for us. We'll continue to look at and understand where else we might need to be going, but the work is hard. It's not easy, but we spend easily at least 1 full day a month in professional development with the coaches and principals to attack this work. The other thing that I think it's important to note is that we've tried to strategically align our building goals this year, not only to our district goals and trying to set some short-term goals ourselves, not even just overall and what that bump might be for our building for reading, math, behavior, but also picking out our subgroups that are performing the lowest and setting some short-term goals that way. Just next month, we'll be coming up and revisiting after our next universal screening period. What does our recent reading and math data look like? How well does this FAST data align to what we saw with the Iowa assessment data? How closely are you on target to meeting your CSIP goal at the end of the year? What changes will you make? What will you sustain? So we're having those constant conversations.
Amy, first of all, Diane, thank you very much for the report and for everybody that went into it. It's really nice to get this information at this point in the year. I appreciate that a lot. So a couple things I want to say is, obviously we're concerned about the results, but spending an hour with any of our elementary and secondary, I'm sure, principals, they can list off all the things that they're doing, and I know that they are passionate about it, and I know that they care. I know that they're just as concerned as we are. So I don't want us to be perceived as thinking that they're not doing enough. I know that they're working very, very hard and have the expertise. So you can convey that to them, that I appreciate all that they're doing. One of the things that I really focused on as I looked at this information was growth. And I tried to do a little bit of figuring myself of what the trends are for growth. And one thing that I think would be really helpful for me and also for the Equity Committee to understand better what's happening is if we could see growth broken down by subgroups. And I know this information comes from Iowa assessment, so maybe we don't have as much control over what we get as opposed to, say, like our FAST data that we put together ourselves. But I'm wondering if we could partner maybe with like the College of Education and their Department of Educational Measurement. I'm told they have a Department of Educational Measurement, and maybe they could have a grad student or something that could pull some of that stuff out for us, because I'd really like to see what is the difference in growth in our subgroups. I'd like to see that for all of our groups, not just the low performers, but also I'm interested in seeing that for all of our kids. Is that something we could perhaps explore?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I've done a little reading about, the quality of a school is really more about the growth that's happening than it is. Scores matter, proficiency matters, obviously, but growth is a good indication of what's going on in the building. One thing I was wondering along those lines is in the NSS, the National Standard Score, in the national trend, are those the grade level expectations that they list there? Because I noticed they're all standard, what they've put for each grade level increase for growth. They've picked a point of 15 points or 20 points or whatever for that's supposed to be, and I think that's national average. But is that also, does that align with grade level?
I'm assuming that.
Which report are you referring to?
Well, I put my own report together, but it's the one with the many lines on it. I think you pulled it up there from the different years, and we've got at the top you have the national growth curves, and then we have you have for reading, math, and science for the different graduating classes. Does that help you? I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, I think it's. Is that what you're talking about?
No. It's the line drawing.
It's in the achievement
Or
data.
This one. Yep.
Yes, that one. Yeah.
So yeah, certainly the numbers up on top are just standard numbers. That's part of being a national standard score is the numbers are standardized. So
But-
those are nationwide standards.
And the fact that they're nationwide averages, is that what the expectation is for a year of growth? For when we get our kids' reports, it'll say they're reading at a 4th grade level or a 6th grade level, and I'm wondering when we look at those, are we, if we have a 2nd grader that's reading at a kindergarten level, well, actually 2nd to 8th graders don't take the test, so that's not a good example, but you know what I mean. Can we see how many years of growth our kids are getting as we get this data?
Yeah, Sorry. I don't know of a way to show like grade equivalent years of growth. That is something that sometimes we can look at the elementary level. But because it tops out at 12.9, students often in 7th grade, 8th grade hit 12.9. And even though they continue to increase their national standard score, they're not going to show an increase in grade equivalency. So that's been a challenging kind of score, even though grade equivalency makes more sense, I think, to people.
Yeah, it's more easily understood, I think. Yeah.
And then Iowa Assessment does offer 2 ways to measure growth. One is just standard gain, which is the report that I showed you tonight. And that's just a very simple measure of what did they score this year, subtract what they scored last year, what's the difference, and then let's average those. They can also give us a report that is determined on expected growth. The reason I don't like the expected growth chart is they base it on averages. So a student who is low performing actually has a lower rate of expected growth than a student who is high performing. Their rate is expected to be at an increase. That is exactly not what we want to be doing in our district. We want those low kids to have an accelerated rate of growth. So that's been a chart that I haven't like to use, because even though you may be meeting expected growth, that will actually increase your achievement gaps
Yeah,
rather
and
than
I'd
decrease
heard that
those.
actually from one of our principals, which is why I wondered if maybe the grade equivalency would be better, but yeah, if that's not. Lastly, and then I'll stop taking too much time, but the other thing that a staff person mentioned to me is that we have black students and African students. Many African students are also black in the same category. I know in Power School we don't have that as two categories, but a staff person had asked me if that would be something that we could see disaggregated as well. That would be hard, and I know, because we don't get that from Iowa assessments, but with our FAST data, and the reason this person was asking this is because many of the African students are ELL students. So if we say all black students, we're including ELL in that, and I would be interested in seeing those two groups separately. Is there any way that we can, it would be a lot to ask of our teachers, but if maybe as they're doing their data recording that they could separate those? And if the answer is no, it's okay, but I just thought I would ask.
Yeah, we have shared some data with you in the past that separated out our ELLs.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can do that and look at our non-ELLs versus our ELLs. I don't know if there's a way to separate out ELL and then disaggregate it by race. That might be a little challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this staff person was just saying that it makes the black category appear like we're not making any growth, and you know, when we throw in ELL students that are brand new to the district, that's going to force that number down. So, yeah, I'm just trying to dial into the data a little further and we'll let some.
Things we're not in control of.
Exactly.
Selection of those was predetermined.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay, I will stop monopolizing the microphone. Thank you.
I had one quick question, and I do apologize for not getting this to you guys sooner. So if you can't answer that, that's perfectly fine. You can email the answer. First, thank you for preparing the data. And I was just curious, actually two questions. Do we have a number of how many students opt out of taking the Iowa assessment a year and how that's broken down across these categories? And the second, have we talked to other districts that may have a large population of ELL? Because that's the group that really jumped out at me based on their growth numbers, on how they're trying to address that English not being their first language. I just know from one of the districts pretty close to us, West Liberty, one of the things that they started a few years ago is having teachers or test monitors in the classroom that actually read the question and the answer. Well, not the answer, but the choices. Just curious, are any of our schools doing that? Do we know? And again, if you don't have that answer, I perfectly understand, and you can get that to us at another time.
I'll take your first question, and I'll pass your second one on to Laura here. By state legislation, we are not allowed to have any students opt out of Iowa assessments. The only students who would not take it are those students who have significant cognitive delays, and then they would be on an alternative assessment. So they are still assessed, but not possibly through Iowa assessments. But otherwise, students are not allowed to opt out of it.
And the accommodation that you were mentioning that happened at that district that's common across all districts. ELs are actually open to receive accommodations depending upon their proficiency levels, and so reading the test question and the selection of answers, not the answer, as you mentioned, of course, is something that our English learners and anywhere across the state would have access to on a standardized test. Doesn't mean they automatically get that accommodation. There are guidelines that are sent out by the Department of Education that we share with our students. Some of them may be receiving the test in a small group environment, or it may be, like you just said, having the test read aloud to them as well. As far as connecting with other districts, several of the administrators in our district participated in an English Language Learning Academy last year. That was a part of the Department of Ed. And We collaborated, worked on improvement plans, learned from each other, so that's a part of a routine process that the DE supports. This year, because there was a change in the director, or there was actually a vacancy for quite a while in the English language learning consultant position, that didn't go on this year as it had planned, but we actually would have had the most administrators participate in that had it gone on as planned. So they plan to pick that up next year, and we'll make sure that we have our a group of administrators participating in that again. We also have regular collaboration with our Grantwood AEA ELL consultants who do some networking with us. As a matter of fact, one of the next couple Mondays, either our ELL coordinator or myself will attend a networking meeting to look at data, professional growth, professional development plans, instructional models. And so that's one of the ways that we connect with some of the other districts. So we're always trying to collaborate as far as that goes, but those are a couple of the specific ways that we are trying to reach out and see what other districts are doing so we can learn from them as well.
I'm a little bit worried as we transition to the new Iowa assessment that we're going to lose some of this year-over-year trend data, growth data, and we're using that as a primary means to determine whether the interventions, Amy, that you described that are happening throughout all of our elementary schools, so we're going to lose some ability to gauge the effectiveness of some of those interventions. And I know you guys are thinking about it. I'm kind of worried this transition year is going to be tough.
Certainly, we're going to miss that trend data, but I would say we're more heavily concentrating specifically because the K-3 legislation requires us to look at the FAST assessment or the state-approved assessment. So I would say because we give the universal screener 3 times a year, we're more heavily monitoring what's happening on FAST. Not that we're not paying attention to the summative data. We certainly are. We want to see the impact there, of course.
Yeah. Thanks.
Maybe if I could offer just one other quick note about EL. It's been a challenge to find enough certified instructors. And one of the things that we've been very fortunate, just recently it was announced that we're going to have a partnership that's going to allow us to have some of our current professional educators, 22 of them, go through a program where they'll be able to get certified. We're really excited about that. It allows us to make sure that we've got EL programs in all of our schools. I think many of you know, especially those that are new to the door may not know, we had a lot of students that used to refuse services because the choice was either get on a bus and go across town to a school or stay at home with my neighborhood friends. So having EL programs in the school of origin is a huge plus for those students. And so next year we'll have maybe all but one or all of our elementary schools with an EL program in it. And then we're looking to augment our EL staff beyond just the minimal programs that we want to offer so that there is more support throughout the classrooms and more expertise on our teaching staff. So it's a huge opportunity for us. It's going to take a few years for that to bear some fruit, but we're really going to see a change in the number of folks that we have in the district that carry that EL certification.
Other comments, questions from directors?
Just one last thing, and I excuse me if I came across as the pessimist. I did not mean to. The blame goes everywhere. I take it as a board member. I think we're not doing enough on it. I don't think the parents in the community are off the hook either that way. But I think that you know, when I look at the trends, and even if you go further back in our protected groups, I think we have great opportunities, I guess the best way to say it, to make some strides there, and I want to be a part of that as much as we can, and I think that we've got to address it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the report and the additional information about the questions that we posed. Can I suggest a slight change to our agenda and cover the agricultural program next? I know we've got a number of folks in the audience that are here for that agenda item. If it's too disruptive for folks, we can not do that change, but I'm just respectful of folks who are in the audience who are really here to hear that conversation and maybe get into that, and then if they need to move on, they're able to as we get into other agenda items. Are folks okay with that audible shift in our agenda? Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. So we'll do the agricultural program and then come back to the enrollment demographics and class size.
All right, so I'll try to provide a brief overview here, and then, like you guys said, there's some people in the audience, and obviously Director Hemingway has been heavily involved in this work. But this work for us really started in June of 17. There was a presentation to the board, I believe, during a work session at that June meeting where we had some FFA folks from the state and some local districts come and present to us about what FFA was and what a vocational agriculture program entailed at that time. And at that time, we were tasked with forming a committee to study this work and to meet and talk about potential benefits for students in the Iowa City Community School District if we were to start such a program. So we've been meeting since July of about a month after that meeting. We convened a team that included local partners, some of which you heard from this evening. So we definitely want to thank everybody that participated on that committee for their time, effort, and energy. They were more than willing to give up time during the day, the evening, to go on trips to do that. And so we have some very enthusiastic community partners in that regard, and thank them for their service on that group. The committee met 4 different times from July through December, which with the last meeting we held was really a debrief of some site visits we took. And we took December 1st, we took 2 different teams. One team went to Southeast Polk and to Central Campus in Des Moines, and another team went to Lone Tree and Muscatine, and we were able to view their programs and what they offered for opportunities for their students in VocAg and FFA. We did a student survey in the fall to gauge some student interest. You have some of those results there posted to the agenda for you. And then what we have included there in the board packet for tonight is a memo with what we believe would be some options for the district to consider. The committee is obviously the most in favor of the first option that involves Iowa City starting our own program. Let me make sure I have the memo open here. And you see some cost figures there. When we talk about hiring a teacher to start an ag ed program in the Iowa City Community School District, there would need to be some additional conversation, I believe, on our end about if we try to give it a go for an intro-level course at all 3 high schools. I think that's what we're proposing to you this evening, is that we would do an intro-level course at all 3, engage some student interest, and then continue to look at how we expand and grow that program over a period of time. You also see some curricular materials and supply line item costs there. Just when you're thinking about kind of your fiduciary responsibility piece and the budget piece of that one's a little bit easier lift for us from the standpoint that those we can use Perkins funds for those, and we have some ability to go get those funds. So just kind of a note there when you're looking through the supplies and materials portion of that. We would, obviously use curriculum funds and some of that Perkins funding to go get those. Option 2 would talk about partnering with the neighboring district, Clear Creek Amana. They actually sat in our first couple steering committee meetings, and then their board decided to go ahead and start a program at Clear Creek. Mark Moody and Tim Keel, their superintendent and high school principal, were a part of that group, and they were very interested in a similar program, and they've offered that they would receive our students if that's the way the district decided to go. It's just similar to other partnerships we've had before. We've sent students to West Branch or Lisbon if they've sought that out. Obviously, that kind of takes the student seeking that out a little bit. In the past, we haven't necessarily promoted that or tried to recruit student interest to send to that program. And then the third option talks about continuing to enhance our career and technical ed programs in the areas of business, family, consumer science, construction, health sciences. So we offer those already, and trying to do a comprehensive review of what we have. We've had several conversations, or you've heard me say before, that we have a great back-end experience at the Kirkwood Regional Center and some other opportunities for our students. But I do believe we have responsibility to articulate some better pathways for our kids and to introduce those opportunities earlier on in their secondary career at junior high and high school. And so nevertheless, I think there's work to be done on option 3 that we need to continue to do. But that would be, obviously, depending on what your decision is this evening, that would be the fallback option about what we could continue to work, and I think work we will continue to do regardless. But that's a brief overview of what the committee's done, where it's been. We could talk about details of what we saw in the site visits if you want to know more about what the actual specific curriculum would look like and things like that. Really, I think the broad brush stroke of that is you can take the curriculum in several different directions as far as what works for you. The case curriculum is one we've talked a lot of time and spent a lot of time with, and we have a couple teachers or a former teacher and a current teacher in the audience that would be happy to discuss any of that with you too. But with that overview, I'd leave it open for your questions or see what direction we could take it for you.
Well, and I'd just like to add to that. And at first, I'd like to add that anyone in the audience who is part of the committee, if they'd please stand and be recognized at this moment. And, we did put a lot of time into it. For me, it even started a year before that. I went to the state convention for FFA and was so moved by what I saw there that I truly felt that our students were missing and lacking from that opportunity. We're talking about pathways, we're talking about opportunities, and I think many of the speakers tonight were right on with there's so many opportunities, not necessarily just if you're on a farm operation and that they're agribusiness and finance and transportation and programming. When I was at the state convention, the past president of the state FFA is a programmer who graduated from Iowa State in electronic engineering and was creating a diagnostic software for John Deere combines and tractors, and had an opportunity to talk with him for a couple of hours, and just an amazing young man. And the diversity, I was amazed. I took some vocational agriculture, and I date myself when I say vocational agriculture, and when I put my hat in the paper, I think I heard from every ag educator in the state that I was using outdated terminology. We should be talking about agricultural education. Again, now I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. The curriculum that we saw with the case programming at Southeast Polk, I was with a group that went there, is amazing. It's exactly the type of hands-on type of curriculum that we want our students to have. And I think that was an excellent, what they're doing at Southeast Polk. They have a fish project where they're raising fish inside the classroom, and the water's filtered through lettuce, and the lettuce goes to the cafeteria, and they have a greenhouse where they sell baskets to a community in town. It's a fundraiser, it's a community activity, and spoke with a student there, not knowing that she was the president of the chapter. And even though she was going to a school on an athletic scholarship, she attributed FFA to getting her out of her shell, out of her comfort zone. So we're looking to provide opportunities for our kids and find their passions to engage themselves. And when we talk about these opportunities, they really need to be at the school. I know we changed the rotation, but I had some things to bring up about how our numbers in participating in our auto classes that we used to have on site have plummeted when we moved it off campus. So for myself, I'm going to be making a motion after everybody has an opportunity to talk. But I think that we have to make sure that these opportunities meet a 5-minute bell schedule and where the kids can actually take it.
Thanks, Phil. Other comments, questions?
I have some comments, I guess. I think the ag program is a good idea. I don't know that I'm ready to jump in with both feet right away. I'm more, I guess, aligned with the third option, because I think as a board we've talked about this a lot, that we do want to enhance our career and technical education. And I think if we just go right in with ag, that kind of limits us from maybe looking at the whole program and what we can add and what students here want, what the jobs are that people want. You know, I looked at FFA, I researched it online, I even researched what are the negatives about FFA, which you don't find, so that's a good thing. You know, I think it's good. When I was here earlier today, I sat on the World Language Curriculum Review Committee, and we've had 3 or 4 meetings on that, and it's a tough one because in there we talk about, how do we bring back languages that we cut? For example, German, or offer more languages that we don't have in the district already. When we cut German, that was $239,000 in the budget. When we cut 7th grade foreign language, that was another $124,000. So when I look at the numbers on here, you know, I'm just kind of equating it to that. 4th grade orchestra was $444,000 that we saved a year. So I guess for me, I really would like, if we're going to look at career and tech, to expand it. The work that the district's doing, looking at this with the pathways, and really dive into everything before we make a decision on just one thing.
I just had a couple of questions, and again, I'm sorry for not getting these to you guys earlier. But first of all, thank you, Director Hemingway and the committee, for the work and effort that you put into this to provide us with this feedback. I really do appreciate having that information, but I was just curious. I know a lot of the committee members stood up and spoke and shared their passion for us bringing FFA to the district. How many of our students actually served on the committee, and do we have a breakdown of what schools they attended? I was just curious because I didn't have any current students come forward to express an interest. And then looking at the survey results, I read some of the comments, and a lot of them, well, not a lot, but a few was, what is FFA? Was there any type of sort of intro presentation done to our students before they were given this survey? Because I would hate for them to think that FFA is just farming, you know, dealing with cows, sows, and plows. Was there a discussion on some of the soft skills that they can gain from that before our students went in and took the survey? Because just looking at the survey data, I think the highest one, and my computer is frozen now, we had about 36% interest rate in one of the one of the options there. And I mean, that's concerning when we're being asked to consider almost, close to $1 million based over a course of 3 years of adding a class to our curriculum. I would just like to see more information and providing our students with more background on what FFA is and the type of soft skills that they can gain, and a lot of the opportunities that 2 of the younger members of the committee stood up and spoke about that I think just being a parent would be beneficial for our students.
You want to go on the survey, Matt?
Sure. We didn't have any current students on the committee for this go around. When we did the student survey and when we talked to the team about the student survey, your point, Director Malone, was definitely one we discussed a lot about how do we provide some context, you know, to what FFA is or what agriculture education looks like today. That was difficult to do in pushing out a survey without spending time having a conversation, you know, with large group formats to students. I think it's something that we know we would have to pay a lot of attention to if we do move forward with a FFA and ag program, that we are going to have to almost change a mindset about what people, you know, might come in with preconceived notions about who this is for or what it's about to do that. And I think you heard an example from a couple people today that, you know, their mind was definitely changed after experiencing that program, and I think students we talked to on the visit. So that would be a definite piece we would have to account for, because I think it's just like computer science standards. We hear about computer science standards from the state, and people think about, well, who are programmers, right? What does that job look like? So there's definitely preconceived notions I think kids enter our system with that, to engage them in this type of experience would take some advanced lead for us to do and some work for us to do. In the survey, that was a little bit difficult to do. We tried to do it in some of the, prompting of, why they're completing the survey and what we're looking at. I think another part of our process was Phil spent some time at the Johnson County Fair and, talked to some kids there. It's kind of the same thing. Obviously, those students are already involved and hooked into agriculture in some way, but even so, I think there's, the same type of thing. What else can it additionally offer you that you might not already have that mindset with? So,
And in the survey, if you went through all the responses, there were responses in there that said that they're interested in this very much, and they were even thinking of transferring to Mid-Prairie if this was something that wasn't offered. And we have a lot of students that go to Mid-Prairie. If you look at the open enrollment data and those that enroll out of the district, and we lose a lot of funds that way. Nothing we do is cheap. We offer a very elaborate AP course offerings, and the state doesn't require us to have a single class. This is for the other students, the ones we were just talking about in our data that and all of our kids can benefit from this. When I was at the state convention, FFA members were telling me that in Chicago they are using FFA as dropout prevention. And we don't think of inner city Chicago as an area where FFA would be a big draw, but it is. As far as, Project Lead the Way, I don't think we had a bunch of kids coming up here and saying we wanted to have engineering, but we have Project Lead the Way to the point now that in our new construction, we have classrooms designated to it. This is not, and this is not inexpensive, but we'll have community partners that will help with this. The service projects that these students do give them great entrepreneurial and business experience. And, we have got to recognize that being in a Big Ten college town and that we've got to provide for everyone in our community, every student. And this is not the end. Believe me, Paul, I'm going to be back wanting the home building program. I'm going to be wanting auto at the building level. And pre-apprenticeship programs, and I'm going to push on all of them. But I think this curriculum is very beneficial, and it has the ability for students to get cross-curricular credits and get science credits through the programming as well. And we happen to have an employee that is certified to teach this curriculum on staff, as I've been told by HR. So, I'll make a motion that the board approve option 1 and that we make agricultural education a priority in the Iowa City Community School District.
Second.
Further discussion.
Yeah,
I've got some comments. I think others do.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I do
JP.
too. Yeah, so I agree with you, Phil. This is for everybody. AP kids can take this. My brother's a pretty good example. A much always better student than me and very high achieving, valedictorian in his class and was in FFA. And he went on to, get a full ride for a master's degree to the Kennedy School of Government studying ag policy, and then worked for Senator Harkin for a number of years. And so the careers in ag are tremendous, and they really, and the soft skills are really important. And we don't really do that in a systemic way for all of our kids. You can get it in different places, and if you really enjoy, your speech class, you can find it. But what I like about this is the curriculum is there, it's very good. It looks very expensive, but that's the same cost of every single teacher in the district, if anything. And hearing that we can get some money for some of the supplies from Perkins and other places, I think that makes these numbers look really good. I like the way in option 1 that you've laid out some different options moving forward, because I think Project Lead the Way is a great example. Sometimes we have to provide the vision and the kids will follow. I can't tell you how many, I work with a lot of teenagers. Almost none of them want to go into anything having to do with computers, but that's where the money and the jobs, and they all think, oh yeah, it's programming. And they have no idea that there's just data mining and all of this really rich stuff. Ag is not going away. we can't outsource our agriculture, or we can, but that's more expensive. And I think what we have going on in Iowa City that the school district is tapping into a little bit is the local food stuff. And I think we're tapping into that as much as we can, and I just see this as something that provides opportunities that we're not providing right now in a really systemic way for kids to have all kinds of experiences. And I'll tell you, if we get a couple kids to those conventions, they're going to come back, and it's going to be twice as many the next year, and that's how these programs grow. So I'm really excited about option one. I do like that you're providing different ideas moving forward with maybe we expand this into two schools, maybe we don't because we haven't seen the interest. So I'm a big fan of that, and just have had, I mean, I grew up as a town kid. I wasn't a farm kid, but those were our two groups of kids. And but even the town kids, like my brother, got a lot of skills from this and turned it into a really successful career in DC.
So I have a financial question. I'm wondering, what are the rules about what parts of this could be donated funds? So like if we went to John Deere or Kinsey Manufacturing and told them we'd really like to do this, but we need some help, can they help with the materials? What other parts can they help with financially?
Sure, any donation would come in as a form of miscellaneous revenue, and it would be put into the general fund for that specific purpose. So a donor or a group of donors could fund any or all portion of this program if they would choose to do so. My only caution is when you employ the person to do this, it's an ongoing cost. It's not a one and done kind of a thing like materials or a piece of equipment or something like that. And so it gets to be an annual obligation. And so I think the board would need to go into this prepared to fund the staffing portion of that, even if there were a donor that would come up with the supply piece of it.
Because another thing I was thinking about is I think it was mentioned, I forget by whom, but that there could be some revenue produced, and granted, it's not going to be $90,000 to pay for the teacher, but you know, the kids can sell some things, and there can be some things that they could give back to the program. That I mean, I'd like to see starting somewhere, and you know, and we haven't hit in this option going with 3 high schools right off the bat. The other question I'm wondering is, I know we like to have everything the same everywhere, but do we need to have it at 3 high schools, or do we want to start smaller with it in one place and then expand from there? It's not ideal, but...
Yeah. I think the option we felt most comfortable with was trying to establish interest at each of the 3 and then revisiting that conversation, because I do think you're on to a larger kind of perspective there, Director Rowland, with what needs to be considered in option 3 with that work we do either way, that knowing that, you know, some of these programs are expensive, the staffing cost is a recurring cost like Craig had just talked to you about, and, you know, can we legitimately do everything at all 3 campuses, or do we need to start to, you know, be a little bit careful and planful about how those options are offered? I do think that's a long-term conversation we need to have with you all about how we see that going. And you know, there's a way we can talk about introduction to certain things, and then how do we look at advanced experiences in a different way. And so that's part of that larger CTE conversation I think we have. I think for this one, not knowing where we would see potential interest the most, that's why we felt comfortable saying, well, let's try all 3. Maybe one high school is the one where we get the most interest from, and that's where we decide to commit the program to long term. But we can't answer that question right now.
So we wouldn't necessarily put the facilities in and go full bore ahead in 3 places. We would kind of a trial, see how it goes, and then maybe at that point.
Yeah, I think the facility one we'd want to be very careful about and planful about, because I mean, like Phil talked about, I mean, there was some facilities where, you know, they had the Cadillac from the greenhouse to the fish tanks to, you know, the hydroponic lights, everything going on, to, you know, where you could do it in a classroom space to get going. And then, you know, once we have a commitment, or once we know interest is established and this is something we're committing to for the long term, then we could make some better decisions about how to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing we got on the committee and going around to Southeast Polk and talking with the people on the committee is that so much of this agricultural education and FFA is driven by student interest. And I think the option where you go to all three schools and you get that starting off, you don't need a greenhouse at all three schools. And it's part of that introduction and getting everybody to understand what exactly is involved and that type of a thing. And then when we go forward, then we can see where it would best align with the facilities that we have at existing schools and that type of thing, and work it that way. And I can't impress on board members enough to visit Central Campus in Des Moines and see what they're doing there, because it is absolutely phenomenal, and it's a model that should be followed. And discussions I've had with Matt on that is, and with our whole career and technical curriculum is that we have got to better align, like the example they have there, that we best utilize, and there's that building block of curriculum, because we're missing that right now. We have little bits here, little bits there. This is not a one and done. This is a start, but it's a start going forward. And if we look at, you know, nationally and statewide, this is being pushed by everyone, that this is something that is missing and lacking.
So a couple questions, if I may. As I understood, Matt, from your original comments on the topic, that option 3 is something we're going to do regardless. That's ongoing work, whether we choose option 1 or option 2. Option 3, we're going to be doing, and it's part of our planning process going forward.
Right, and I think we've heard that from you guys too, that that's important work to you, and we definitely plan to continue that.
I just wanted to confirm that. So then my second question is around option 1. The way I read option 1 was first year kind of a pilot, and years 2 and 3 were conditional based on the findings of the previous year. And so that's how I read it. So I did not see option 1 as a commitment of that total dollar amount that you laid out across the multiple years. I saw option 1, if this is something that we wanted to go forward with, was that $200,000, the staff, the curriculum, and the contract for FFA. So am I interpreting the option 1 correctly based on the intent of the committee? Do you think that it's a conditional 1 year, learn, see what the interest is? You know, there's education, there's exposure, there's all these things. I mean, I think we would want to set forward the criteria that we would want to see for moving this program forward into multiple years after the 1 year pilot. So I'm just trying to gauge my understanding there.
Yep, no, that's a perfect point, and I think what we were hoping to do and just showing you year 2 and 3 there is that, you know, if we're going to do it, we're going to try to do it the best we can, right? And so if it goes the best we can and we get great student interest and we get a great instructor that knocks it out of the park, we wanted you to be fully aware of what that could look like when we, you know, if we have increased student interest and we have a lot of kids signing up for it, then just to Craig's point about, you know, that recurring cost, we wanted your eyes wide open of what that could grow into, right? So that we weren't showing you, well, it's only going to cost you 1 teacher.
Yeah.
Well, that might not be completely honest, right? If it projects out where it's more successful, and that we do have to look at growing that into a little bit larger. So, but our understanding would be, yeah, we do the 1 teacher, we see what we get for student interest, and then, you know, we can revisit that with you.
I mean, my general feeling is that a pilot to learn based on, you know, the experiences that we've heard tonight, that it's a meaningful program, curriculum, it makes a difference, and we have some outcomes that we could be gearing ourselves to assess at the end of the pilot to say, yes, it had the outcomes that we believed it did, therefore, let's move forward and expand the implementation or refine or hone the implementation. I just think I support pilots to learn from. We're doing it with the course that came forward from the Students Against Hate and Discrimination. I mean, so we're piloting that and have been thoughtful about how to bring that forward in a way to learn from that experience to see if it's something that we want to grow going forward. So if we're couching this as a pilot with the understanding that if we bring a teacher on, that it may be a 1 year assignment, it might not be something that extends. I mean, so the expectations are very clear until we can understand whether this is something they want to take forward into future years. You know, I could understand a pilot process. I mean, because of the value I'm learning that this kind of programming offers.
All right, I'm going to jump in finally. I've got a few thoughts and then just a couple questions. I think looking at the student interest, you know, I kind of read through those comments and saw some of the same things that Director Malone had seen, that there was a lot of, I don't know what this is. So if you kind of discount that and you looked at the rest of them,
most of the ones that knew what it was were very, very positive. I think I remember one that was kind of negative that knew what it was. So at least the people who know about it are interested in it. And I go to the survey with question 7, which was, they went through if all those subjects that were listed prior to that were offered, how interested would you be in taking them? And it's about 91% of the kids were either somewhat or very interested in taking them. So that's a big interest. The problem with that is that's a list of 30 plus classes, and we're talking a teacher to start with. And so I guess one of the two questions I have is, what's the difference between what we would be offering and this kind of full-fledged FFA program that does have all the great benefits? How many teachers would that be to have this program that's going to be, very sustainable and have a lot more offering? What if we're here? Where does this end? And what kind of bang for a buck can we get with the one teacher? And the second thing is, if we are going to continue with option 3 no matter what, does also saying we're going to spend the money on option 1 impact the ability to do those other things, as Paul had mentioned? Because even Director Hemingway wants to come back for more on construction and auto and everything else, and I would too. And I just want to make sure we're not hamstringing anything. I mean, I'm a big fan of FFA, so I'm trying to play a little devil's advocate, but I want to really know what we are going to get. I understand it's kind of a very first tier level kind of thing, but what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, and with the chair's permission, I would like Kathy? Kate, excuse me, I apologize. I'm terrible with names, and if we met 30 times, I could remember it. But to your point with, that was one of the things we discussed. You can't have agricultural education has to happen in order to have FFA. You can't have FFA without agricultural education. There's a beautiful, and it was part of the packet, triangular piece, and you were alluding to it in your presentation. And if we bring this in, day one, we can start an FFA chapter. And then all of the things the gentleman was talking about from Lone Tree, about leadership and those things start day one with that. The other, as far as the curriculum, since you taught it for 9 years, and that, please, if you could answer Sean's question.
Well, and Bridget might be able to answer too.
Okay.
I mean, I was single teacher. Bridget was single teacher in Lone Tree. I mean, I had 180 kids every 2 days. We were a rotational block schedule. I wasn't able to teach 30 different subject areas. So there was an introductory class. And then from there was our sequential units. So animal science was one of ours, aquaculture. And some of those other topics were taught within there. Didn't always teach an agronomy class every year, but principles of plant science was in horticulture and those sort of things as well. So, and I based my classes off of what the interest level was of the students and what I taught ag shop because that's what the teacher before me had taught. Well, that was on its way out and somebody else was teaching shop at the time. So to build into a GIS program, to try to center towards being more productive or progressive in the class offerings and those sort of things to prepare them for careers. So you can't teach 30 different classes, that's true. But you try to do the best with the population. And Bridget, help me if there's anything else to add to that, but.
Yeah, this is Bridget Mahoney.
She currently teaches at Lone Tree.
Currently teaches at Lone Tree and was a member of the committee.
Yeah, Katie was right on. A lot of the courses can be basically whatever the students want to learn, as long as they fill in, obviously, the Iowa education guidelines and those sorts of things. I teach courses with Kirkwood Community College, so my students get high school credit and college credit, so that's a draw for one of my classes. The animal science, I teach the case, I teach shop. So it really depends on what our students are interested in as far as what you offer in a program. And that's going to come after you figure out what your students are interested in. My first you're teaching at Lone Tree, I had an ag sales class and natural resource class. Well, those have enveloped into now an agronomy class and a communications class, because that's where my students' interest lies. So you might start out with just natural resources, but you might end up with 6 other courses that your teacher might teach.
Taught small pets care class. The curriculum, the basics of that were very similar to animal science, talking to my ag kids about reproduction of swine or cattle, but now we're talking about dogs, cats, chinchillas, those sort, So obviously different career pathways and different exposure to the different jobs, but the core principles were the same. Like I was saying, horticulture, agronomy. So.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Is there a way for this course, because we were talking about gauging student interest, instead of committing to a whole year, can this be done as an elective for a trimester, just like we had concerns with the ethnic studies course that we're offering, I believe, 3rd trimester for students across several schools? Was that considered, was that discussed, or was it just option 1 as a full year?
Yeah, I think there would be a few challenges with just doing it in a trimester format, potentially. I think part of that would be knowing if, to do all the FFA chapter component and to do it in a scaled down version and then try to recruit student interest. I think we felt like, okay, if you were going to try to really gauge student interest and make a commitment to doing it, this would set you up for some level of success to do that. In a smaller fashion, it might be harder to really give it a true shot, in a sense. I think this would be the most scaled down version we could hope to predict any kind of success off of. Sean, to kind of answer your second point to that question, I think your second question was, will this prevent you from doing any of those options in the future? I don't know if I can independently answer that, or if, it's only fair to ask that question of ag. I think any financial commitments you take on, right, are going to impact what you're able to do in the future. And Craig's going to talk to you about budget assumptions here right after this one, after we move from this topic. So I think that's just a general philosophy thing, about making priorities and, what budget position that puts you in the future for different things. And just trying to say, these are our priorities, this is what we're going to commit to, and then what, cost does that commit us to for the long term. So I think that's probably the same answer I would try to give you, and anyone, Craig would probably be proud of me for just saying, don't just spend the money, because that's our, we want as much as we can have, and he tries to pull us back to the mean like he should a little bit. But I think that's what I would tell you is, we know the fiscal climate we're in some of those things. But yeah, I do think we need to look at some of those other CTE areas, and then, how do you make that puzzle work when our pie's not getting any bigger?
And the other thing with FFA, that's the closest we'll come to year-round curriculum. And the FFA instructor, FFA doesn't go away at the end of the bell on the last day of school. The summer is very active with projects at the state fair. You ever go to the state fair? Right in the heart of it, the FFA displays are extremely impressive. And so there'll be students that'll be taking projects there. There is activities year-round with this type of curriculum. So it is, it's not a part-time curriculum. It's a full-time curriculum for the students.
Said a few comments to come back after everyone has talked. So I don't know, Phil, you kind of came after me like I was against this a little bit, but I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just against jumping with this one right away. As opposed to, I guess the way I look at it is, why do we choose ag as the choice over maybe home building? What if home building was the one that had more student interest, or auto mechanics had more student interest? So, I guess that's where my hang-up is a little bit here, is because we've put together a group that studied this that was pro-ag coming in. So, of course, they're coming out with their recommendation is to go forward with an ag class. The couple other things I had, issues with, and it kind of relates to what Ruthina talked about, was the student survey. It was 690 students, and of the students that responded, it was 67% white. In our district is 57% white. Only 9% of our black students responded. Black or African American students in our district is almost 20%. Black and African. only 4% of our Hispanic students responded, and we have 11% of our students are Hispanic in our district. So, you know, we did a really good job of getting survey responses back from white students that said maybe they were interested in this. So I guess that's another issue I think about.
Well, and Paul, I didn't take your comments to be that you were against it, but I was just pointing out that, you know, we pushed Project Lead the Way through our schools, and I don't think there was a real, you know, I don't think there was anyone on the committee that wasn't against, but that wasn't for it. And as far as the respondents on it, if you go to the state convention, or get involved and see what's the people involved in FFA, it is a mosaic of our state population. And the thing I was most impressed with when I went to the state convention is the female participation in FFA and in leadership. And that provides great opportunities for young women in our school district for leadership opportunities and things that way. And to say that this report was not reflective of the breakdowns of our groups, I don't know that we have many of them that are. It was a voluntary survey. Is that right? So. I guess we could have forced every student when they were taking their state assessments to fill out the report. Maybe that's something we can do in the future. But I don't think that we can shoot it down just because of the voluntary responses to a survey.
I'm not saying that we should force every student to do it. It was their choice to take this, so they could have taken it or not. I'm not asking to shoot it down for that reason either. I'm asking for us to not rush to a judgment, not rush to a decision on this. I mean, even you said in your speech there that we should go and visit maybe some of these places, campuses, and none of us have done that I know of except for yourself. So to, you know, even to jump in for that 1 year, I think is pretty quick on our end. That's just my opinion.
Right, and maybe I'm at fault. I should have proposed everything. You know.
I'm not done yet, Phil. Can I just finish?
Excuse me, I apologize.
And so, a couple other things. You know, you brought up the transfers to Mid Prairie. We do have a lot of transfers to Mid Prairie, and one of the biggest reasons for that is for their homeschooling program. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of kids end up transferring to Mid Prairie. Also, like I said earlier, I mean, I've known you for a while now, and you've been a big proponent of home building and auto mechanics. And so I guess I'm just curious why ag is the one that comes first out of all of those.
I could have proposed them all. Right now, we do have auto mechanics at the regional center. It's woefully inaccurate and inadequate. And as I said earlier, I will go over the numbers of how that curriculum dropped when it moved off campus. The home building program needs to come back and should have come back much quicker than it is taking. But we do have ACE programming and that being offered at the regional center. This is something that's not offered at all and has never been offered in this district. And the opportunities that come from FFA are enough for me to put it at the top of the list. And that's where I'm putting it at. And I guess I should have taken more people with me when I went to the convention. I should have taken a Suburban from the fleet with everybody to the state fair and shown them what's there. But I feel that this is I feel this is crucial for our kids and our community. And many times we're presented with things, and it's because, well, they're doing it in Waukee. Well, Waukee's got FFA and vocational and agricultural education. And at a lot of small schools, it's the most active student activity. And I think in a district that has 4 athletic directors, and we're one district, one vision, and have double platinum athletic facilities and things like that, we can find it to provide this type of curriculum for our students.
Again, I think you're getting a little angry at me for saying that I'm against it. I'm not against it.
Believe
It's
me,
the way
this
it's
is the way I
coming off to
normally
me.
talk. I'm not angry.
But I just want to, just my final thing is, and the reason that I'm saying that we have time to do this, it doesn't have to be in next year, is what I'm saying. I think this is the first time it's been presented to us, and to rush to a motion to approve it for 1 year with one night of hearing about this, I think is just quick. That's my personal opinion.
Yep. I'm going to just echo that and then call the question. I think for me, I am very persuaded by the folks that came and provided comments tonight and the value and what you've presented. I am very interested in pursuing the agricultural curriculum and establishing an FFA chapter. Personally, my fiduciary responsibilities kicking in. I feel like I need to have a little bit better understanding from a budget standpoint of what this impact is, not just for year one, but when it's successful, what's that longer-term commitment? And so you helped me, Matt, kind of see how this option has played out. So I'm feeling like I'm not quite ready to vote yes on this tonight, but I'm not saying I'm not supportive of the initiative. I just need a little bit more information on how we're going to fund this properly to make it successful and have the impact that we want it to have. And so, are there other comments, questions?
I'll just add on to your budget thing. I think that's part of my what's going around in my head too, because when I hear 1.5% or 1% growth or 0% growth, that's going to affect us.
And I think we just need a little more time to and I don't know if we don't answer this question tonight, do we still have time to get some more budget information on what that impact might look like, to have a discussion at the next board meeting or in February or March, so that we perhaps get this online if we agree to it with more information for next year. So I don't want to feel rushed. I want to have the proper information. At least this is my feeling at the time. So I think we've got a motion on the table that's been seconded, and if there's no further comments or questions, we should open up to vote.
Can you read it again?
Sure. The motion is for the board to approve option 1 and make agriculture education a priority in the district.
Is that assuming the full 3 years of the option?
That is option 1.
Option 1.
Option 1.
You ready to vote?
Yeah.
Okay.
No?
Yeah, I just want to ask, is that accurate, Matt, that it is 3 years, the full 3-year commitment?
That's what option 1 shows, so maybe it's better Phil clarifies that, since it was his motion for what it was, but option 1 for us, yes, would be, we'd commit to the 3 years that way.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm committed to 3 years of agriculture. I'm committed to the success of this. We don't commit to athletic programs that they're temporary or they're occasional. We didn't do it with Project Lead the Way, and we haven't done it with our AP curriculum. And I reiterate that we provide a full slate of AP curriculum not required by the state, which is at great expense. At great expense of what? Of other curriculum for students that don't take AP classes.
I think we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Sean, yours didn't register. Oh, it just did. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with directors Rotland, Clausen, Eystone, and Hemingway voting yea, and directors Ressler, Godwin, and Malone voting nay.
Thank you. It was a good conversation. Appreciate that. We'll move on to the next item, enrollment demographics and class size report for 2017-18.
Okay, you get to keep hearing from me for a minute here. So thank you. Tonight we have in front of you there enrollment, demographics, and class size report. We did punch it for you so you can add it to your teaching learning reports binder. Keep those all together. This is an annual report we deliver to you. And so the big thing in here, just like the title says, we have enrollment information, we have some demographic breakdowns about what our student population looks like, and then class sizes. We probably won't spend a lot of time on the class size portion tonight because we've spent some time with you at previous meetings already about staffing levels and class size charts and some of that. But if you certainly have any questions that aren't included in that report or would like us to come back with that, we can. But it is included in here, but that's something we've kind of previously talked to you about. So the first part to speak with you about this evening is certified enrollment. And you know that our certified enrollment is a formula, or it's developed based on a formula that the state uses to determine our funding. So it's a big number for us on how we receive funding and how we fund our programming here in the district. And that number for this year is the 14,197.58 that you have in there. We also talk a lot in this report about head counts, and you'll see the number that we use for that aggregate head count is the 13,974. You're going to see that in several different places. And that's really more like the amount of students if you kind of think about it that way. So the certified enrollment talks about how we get the funded with the weighted piece, and then really the head counts are when we're talking about how many kind of kids we have that we see in our schools. And then one other one that's in there is really a Grant Wood funded number. Grant Wood Area Education Agency uses a slightly different number based on some different weightings. Students provided instruction at the 13,926.8. So if you look at the head count slide you have in here, this is a good problem that we have in the Iowa City Community School District that you don't see reflected in a lot of places in Iowa right now, so we're thankful for this one. But we, with that 13,974, saw an increase of 341 students, which is a 2.5% increase for us, and you can see our nice trend line there that continues to go up for us. So that is a good thing for us, and when we consider some of our funding challenges, we know that this helps offset some of those problematic issues. Open enrollment, I think the big thing that we are happy with here or proud of, even though we see a net loss in that, you'll notice that our net loss is much different trend for this one year than it has traditionally been, and that is a good thing for us. We saw more open enrollments in. We think we can attribute a lot of that to obviously Liberty High School and some of the new projects we have going on throughout the district. It's not just Liberty, it's some of our other areas as well where we've had upgraded facilities, increased space in those facilities, and then also fewer open enrollments out. So that has been a huge positive for us to see that number kind of turn around. We're hopeful that continues and that we continue to see that decrease, that 19.5% decrease. So that's a huge plus for us, I think, to share with you this evening. And then the last one I have here for you before I turn it over to Adam with some projections is a slide on intra-district transfers. I thought this one was important to just share with you because if you compare it to last year's report, you're going to see maybe a number jump out at you a little bit different there, that 34.9 as far as having one attendance center with that many transfers out, but that's really attributed to that Liberty dynamic going on with allowing those students to have some options for transfer that wouldn't have otherwise. The same thing with North Central being the second highest number at the 20.3% of those students. So that's just attributed to what we've done and what we've worked with you guys on for that transfer policy. But our lowest one is Borlaug at 1.7%. So most kids that are assigned to Borlaug are staying at Borlaug, but you do see a couple different interesting dynamics with those secondary ones based on attendance zones and transfer decisions that we've worked through with you guys. So that's a little bit of an opening. I'll turn it over to Adam here with some projections.
All right. So in terms of district growth projections, we have the same data on the next two slides. This one gives you the actual numbers. So these are our projections for the next 9 years. This is essentially our 10-year projections that we had done last year. You'll notice that our projection for 2017-18, 13,943 is slightly lower than our actual head count. So we came in slightly above, lagging a little bit in K and 1 and then above the projected in most of the secondary grades, particularly the high school grades. Some of that may be attributable to those open enrollment number changes that we saw. So again, when you look at our trends, we have projected growth, projected within 9 years being just under 16,000 students based upon our projections from last year. Continuing with, I mentioned the lag of projections at the lower grade levels. Our projections actually showed that the K-6 total will grow, but then essentially level off over the final 5 years of that period, where we'll see continued growth, which is not surprising given that these kids are these kids essentially, but continued growth in the high school level and the junior high level. In the full report, there are also more detailed tables if you want to look into our where students live projections, which are broken down by elementary school catchment area by grade level. So you can really get into the granular details of what the projections are compared to what the actual numbers are for each of those individual attendance zones. I would encourage you to probably spend a ton of time on that, though, since, as you're aware, we do have the current student potential analysis being conducted by Cooperative Strategies.
Thanks, Adam. And so I have the next few slides regarding demographics. You can find these pages 24 to 34, just a few highlights. So this slide shows our district diversity, and we continue to increase there. Minority percentage increased 1.9% over last year, and with our largest increase seen with our Black students. The next slide around socioeconomic status. Districts use free and reduced price lunch as an indicator of socioeconomic status. And this year at the elementary level, we range from 12.2% at Wickham to 78.9% at Twain. At the junior high level, 21.1% at North Central to 42.1% at Northwest, and 28% at West High School to 39.7% at City. Overall, our district average is pretty steady from the year before, 37.3% last year compared to 37.4% this year. English language learners then is the next slide. These are students who, of course, that speak a language other than English as their primary language. Our numbers have increased dramatically in the last 10 years, from roughly serving 469 students during the 2008-2009 school year to up over 1,265 students this year. The top languages continue to be similar to years past, so after English, Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, French, and Chinese. And then the last chart around demographics is our special education student population. So we saw a high of 15.1%, I believe, population receiving services back in 08-09 to this year, our current low of 9.3% of our student population. Then the next several pages in the report are around class sizes, and like Matt said, you had a report back in November that detailed a lot of this. But at the elementary level, we use, of course, superintendent directions, 3J6, to, as best we can, staff our elementary classrooms. And at the K2 level, our class sizes range from 13 to 25.7 students. And at the third through sixth grade level, our range is from 12 to 31 students per class.
Right, and then you can see the ranges there for junior high and the high school courses and the charts provided to you in the report, but we're running right in that 26 to 29 student range, and then at the high school quite a bit, just a little bit tighter there at the 26 to 27, 28 students per class. Tate High School being a little bit lower. So any questions or anything we could?
What accounts for the drop in special ed students? 6% drop over that period of time. Just curious.
Yeah, Amy can jump in with this too, but I think that just has to do with some of our work in our special ed team and looking at how students are identified, services we're providing to them, interventions and growth may be seen before they need to be identified. But I think that's just some of our ongoing special education work and looking at how we identify students for that programming.
I think identification is key there. I think we were probably over-identifying some students early on. Okay. Remember, we had the Office of Civil Rights and questioning our practices or bringing students aboard. So reevaluating that, have a stronger MTSS process. I think we're holding more students out that way and providing the services on the general education side.
That's good, thank you.
In the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief, but I first of all want to thank you very much for this report. I tell you, I use this report all the time. I look at it all the time, so thank you for all the information you put in it. I pull back, in fact, I bring old year reports to look at too. So thank you. And I wanted to say, echo what you said about the net open enrollment. That is fantastic. In fact, that was 19% change from last year, so that makes a big difference in the checks we have to write. I do want to say that I do miss seeing the actual class sizes that were in the report last year for the secondary sections. That's something, there were like 20 pages of information, 24 pages, and so I do miss that. I hope that you will add that back in at some point. And but I did notice that you included the post-secondary and the Kirkwood Center programs that that the students were choosing, and that was very interesting. So thank you for adding that this year.
I'm going to try and bring a couple earlier conversations with this and what we're going to talk about later on in work session all together, because I'm looking at, like Borlaug, for example, 5th and 6th grade class sizes are really big, and I know at our junior highs the class sizes are pretty big, and we just voted on adding something that's a pretty significant cost to our curriculum, and we're going to look at boundaries and all this other stuff. And as you said, Matt, like, it's all about priorities, and we've had a few board retreats now really looking at priorities, and I think we really need to look at the assessments and class sizes and all these things, and that's really what we've talked about, what we want to address, and increasing different types of curriculum like agricultural education is part of that. And the reason I voted for it and how I'm going to bring this all together is that when we talk about boundaries and all these other things, like we need to figure out how to pay for it all, and that's where our work is really trying to look at the efficiencies at our schools. What can we do as a board to kind of look at policy and how we've built things to address all of these things that we all know need to be addressed, and there's no magic button for it. And in the end, it does come down to money. If we want smaller class sizes, and if we want more vocational training in our schools, if we want to see better results on our Iowa assessments, all of those things are going to come down to how we set our priorities and what we're going to do to make those priorities a reality. And so we've seen a lot of, concerning numbers with, class sizes and some of the assessment numbers. But I'm encouraged that we had such a really good conversation at a work session, a couple months ago, and are going to keep doing that to figure out how we're going to address them. But I think all of these things are so interwoven, and as we run through agendas, right, we look at them as one thing and then one thing and one thing, and it's just, that's not the way it is. So I'm sort of trying to explain why I voted the way I did on the last thing, but also at the same time, I understand how it relates to all of these other things, and I think it's important for us to remember that every time we're looking at something and really try and look much farther out and how we can achieve all those things. But I appreciate the report as well. It's got a lot of numbers in it. Plenty of people have asked us, via email, hey, can we see actual class sizes, not averages? That's been a big thing for folks. I can tell you, looking at some of those averages, they tell a pretty scary picture in some of our schools, and I think some of that's, just how we have to have things organized with, how the just sheer numbers of kids at schools, and how it affects, how many teachers we can have there and stuff. So that's partly on us too.
We can definitely put the frequency counts back in there. I think to your point, Sean, I will say I think our principals have been masters of efficiency, over a very tight fiscal climate, and have tried to staff and master schedule and do things about to max efficiency. And it's no surprise to you guys, but that, the legislative conversation is huge for us. I mean, at some point that efficiency bubble is going to burst, right? I mean, without Liberty High School for us, I think we would have seen that happen more rapidly with some of our high school class sizes. But I attribute a lot of success and a lot of careful planning to those principals to try to get balanced sections, deal with the staff in the most effective way they can as far as trying to spread those things out. And so we can definitely do that, because I just think that further supports their story to show those how they've created those sections and how they've tried to achieve balance and offer the programming options we do have.
Other comments or questions?
I alluded to some data on the regional center, and then the basis of time, I will give them to Kim to just include in the packet. It was more historical data. But again, I want to thank, and I echo the comments by the other members about some of the actual class size numbers and that matching up with other years. But thank you very much for the report.
Well, I guess, just point of clarification maybe, I don't know. I guess if you're going to make comments, I would prefer that it just come out at the board, because I don't know that Kim can just add your comments to the minutes, right? You got the same here?
Right, but you can't be in the minutes, no.
Well, okay. I have with the regional center, we have only 6 students taking, right in this report, 6 students taking Automotive and Transportation Academy A. When we had Automotive at City High, with the first year of Power School, 2006, 2007, we had 84 students involved in auto maintenance and auto tech, 84 versus 6. In 2007, 2008, we had 83. In 2008, 2009, we had 77. In 2009 and 2010, we had 70. In 2010 and 2011, we had 68. In 2011 and 2012, it moved to the physical plant. During that school year, it dropped to 45. The next year, when it was at the physical plant, it dropped to 23. The following year, it went to 24. The last year it was at the physical plant, it was 14. When it went to the regional center, it's been 6, it's been 6, and it's been 6. I was here when the discussions for the regional center were promoted, and people at Kirkwood were saying districts are going to have to bid on the seats available there. I think this just proves that distance is a barrier to education for many of our students.
Other comments, questions? Thank you all for the presentation tonight. Appreciate it. Operational work, we've got a few things to cover here. Craig, I am going to encourage you to be very efficient in your discussion.
I wouldn't have it any other way. We have in your board packet the budget assumptions, and I just want to go through these really, really quickly with you. First and foremost, we do have a calendar that we set forth so that you know what's coming. Tonight are the assumptions. We'll talk again and touch base in February as to how that process is going, as more is known from the state level. And then that all rolls up into a hearing the first part of April, and then we're required by law to actually submit our budget to the Department of Management by the 15th of April. The property taxes, we always try to keep those as stable as possible, but with the approval of the bond this last year, we did tell our stakeholders that we would raise the debt service by, or the overall tax rate, excuse me, by that 98 cents. And so you can expect an increase in the tax rate this year to be able to satisfy the debt that we're selling to put into the projects for our facility master plan. In the assumption number 2, you can see that our tax base did make a nice healthy jump this year, and we're very grateful for that, and that always helps keep the tax rate as stable as possible. But we don't know what it's going to be yet because it all works itself out through the school aid formula. And the The way the school aid formula works is that the tax rate floats to fund what needs to be funded under the formula, and that's all based on your student population and supplemental state aid or the growth that you receive. In assumption number 3, this is the growth that the state will provide us. We're currently in our model, just so that you know, for budget 19, we're using 1.5%, which is the governor's recommendation. I've been hearing recently that the legislators aren't quite as enthused about that number, so we may end up backing that up when we put our budget together based on what the legislators do. They promised us they'd deal with this in the first 30 days of the legislative session. That means they'll have this done by about February 10th or somewhere in that time frame. Under the enrollment, you've already seen these numbers. Matt and Amy and Adam did a good job of laying out what our enrollment is. We just follow that process when we do our budget and our budget projections. Cash reserve, this is one of those levies that is a discretionary levy by the board. We have taken advantage of this over the last few years, and I believe we've positioned the board to be able to relax the cash reserve for this coming year, so it'll help offset some of that increase necessary to pay for the bonds. And that's what we promised our community, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So you'll see probably a little bit less in the cash reserve levy for this coming year. And then IPERS, they found it necessary to bump the district contribution by 0.5% this year, and so that's going to cost us on $100 million in payroll, $500,000 right off the top. And so if you go back to the assumption on the state aid, if we receive only 1% this year, we're going to receive in that, was it 1.4, or where were we at? No, $2.4 million. So you take $500,000 right off the top of that just to accommodate the IPERS adjustment, which is mandatory. Then in assumption number 7, I have some good news for you, and that is our claims are running really under what we had anticipated they would be for this year for our group. And there's really some thoughts from our consultant that we might be able to keep our rates fairly stable, if not stable, for this next budget cycle. And so that's really good news. We'll have to see how it all shakes out here in the next month or so, but it's shaping up to be a pretty good medical year for us in our self-funded insurance. And then just remember that our revenue and expenditures, 84% of all of your general fund expenditures go to support a staff person in this district. We are a people-centered business. It takes people to deliver the educational system, and so 84 cents out of every dollar you spend is tied up in personnel. And so when you're looking for places to save money, there aren't many places to look anymore unless you go to personnel and reduce personnel or make adjustments for personnel. I did give you some broad category of estimates for wages, benefits that I think we're going to try and incorporate into our fiscal 19 budget. Please understand that we've already settled with our teachers a year ago, so that's a fixed cost for us, and we can't go back and adjust that, so we have to incorporate that into our budgeting cycle for the year ahead. We do have over 1,000 FTE for certified instructors now, and so you know, that's a fairly significant number of people within that group. Our other union wages and non-union wages are listed in number 10, and you can see what the settlement trends were for last year for each one of those groups. And then finally on the last page, you have all of our other funds, whether they're PEPAL, SAVE, debt service, or management fund, to kind of share with you what I believe is going to be happening in each one of those areas. So in a few weeks, the second quarterly report will come out, and Leslie and I have been busy projecting for you what you can expect for a year-end balance for 18, what we expect given our revenue estimates for budget 19 and the next 5 years. And really what it's looking like right now is it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that things are really tight. I've been mentioning to you for the last few years, or your predecessors to you on the board as well, that opening up Liberty High School was going to put really an extraordinary strain on our budget. And that plays itself out. In budget 19 right now, you're looking at about a $2.1 million deficit balance, okay? So any expenditures you add for next year are just going to exasperate that problem. And so, you know, I try to help you in your fiscal responsibility. That's one of the things you need to know, is that we're looking at dipping into our savings account to a pretty significant degree unless we're able to control expenditures in 19, okay? We get a little better in 20 because it works itself out as I shared with you that it would, but we still have to control expenditures to a significant degree in that year. So you're right in the middle of your budget stress years from opening up a major building. 18, 19, and 20 are your budget stress years, and to apply your fiduciary responsibility in a manner that's going to be sustainable, we really need to look at controlling our expenditures in every way, shape, or form that we can, okay? And so as a management team, we're talking about areas of efficiency, but as I shared with you, 84 cents is wrapped up in people, and so when we've already tied in a negotiated settlement and things like that, you know, our hands become really more tied as to what options we have available for us. So those are the things that we're faced with as challenges right now in your budget, but those are the assumptions that we're working off of as we move this budget cycle forward. Are there any questions from you?
Hearing none. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate the information. Next up, we have a couple resolutions for SBRC requests.
Leslie will take those.
Both of these are relatively routine or things that we do regularly from Iowa City School District. The modified allowable growth for the abatement of environmental hazards is primarily asbestos, but a little bit of like mold or anything like that. Our lead water testing that we did at a couple of the buildings, if you recall, last spring, I believe it was, Dwayne, all are covered into there. And we get relief from those. We make all of the expenditures out of the general fund per the requirements of the SBRC, and then we're able to recapture that spending authority from them, and that's the request that you have for $320-some thousand. And that's, we run about $250,000 to $350,000 per year. It depends upon which buildings we're doing projects in. So obviously when you're in Coralville Central or City High School, you have more asbestos than you would if you were at some of our newer buildings. The other one I'll cover while I'm speaking here is the first year staffing costs. And again, this has been in our projections ongoing. This number is higher than what we thought it was going to be just because we included more clubs and activities for one thing that we did. We didn't project all of the athletic director and assistant principal in some of our previous projections, and since we staffed it that way, we are able to get those. So this does give us the spending authority back for that application. These will be in front of the SBRC March 13th, I believe, is the date, the physical date at which they will take action at.
entertain a motion for the first resolution on the abatement of environmental hazards. So moved.
Second.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rutland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Eystone, and Hemingway voting yea, and Director Malone absent at time of vote.
Is there a motion for the second resolution on the SBRC application?
So moved.
Second.
Kim?
I'm sorry, was that you, Sean, that moved it? Or was it JP?
It was me.
I haven't figured you guys out yet, sorry.
We'll work in some hand gestures.
Maybe you should. Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rutland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Eystone, and Hemingway voting yea, and Director Malone absent at time of vote.
Thank you very much. The next item, Facilities Master Plan Update. This was a request to understand our process, and knowing that we've got some milestones in front of us, if we're going to continue to entertain the question of accelerating the rest of our FMP projects. We just wanted to know what we needed to do to stay on schedule.
Probably the key document there is the one that says Board of Ed FMP Summary Update, and that provides you with an update of actions that have occurred so far. Again, one of the things that you had asked for, which I think is probably most crucial from that standpoint, is the set of dates in the second set of bullets there that talk about opportunities that are in front of us as we look at board meetings. January 23rd obviously being today, March 27th, April 10th, April 24th, May 8th, May 22nd. And one of the things that you had asked us to do, and we turned over to our facilities team for more action, was to say if we were to back into dates that we needed, what would be the requirements for discussion at the board table as we move towards that. So that you can see one of the things that Dwayne has suggested is that if there is consideration of acceleration for any of the remaining projects, we would certainly want May 8th to be a target date for us to take that type of action on behalf of the board. So with that...
or sooner.
Or sooner. So that we certainly entertain any questions you might have about the exhibits or the process itself.
I mean, this is helpful. This will help us agenda set, and if we need work sessions and that kind of thing, I keep wishing we'd get that student potential analysis in sooner. Anyway, March 20, I thought I heard at one point early March, or was that me wishful thinking?
March 1 is your official date. They said they can possibly get that a little bit sooner.
Okay.
So I need to hold their feet to the fire.
Okay. That's helpful. Questions or comments from the board in terms of this set of dates in front of us? Agenda set, I think we'll want to have these in front of us to make sure that we're doing our work along the way so that we get to that point confidently ready to make a decision. Yeah.
I just make a quick comment, and maybe it's a question. You know, we voted to accelerate the first section and wanted to revisit to make sure that we're not doing anything sort of out of whack. And I know that it's a whole jigsaw puzzle putting them all in order to move around where 10 plexes need to go and all these other things. And so I guess my question is, we've got this timeline of when we need to take an action, but somewhere before that, if we'll have to give you time, if we decide like one thing doesn't make sense to move it where it's at, and would it need to rework the jigsaw puzzle? That's going to take time, right? So I don't think we have a good timeline or a good understanding of when we would have to potentially do that, because you're shrinking down all your decisions there, right?
Yeah, I think, I think we did give you that. We gave you the dates when we would need to know in order to keep the accelerated plan on the schedule that was originally proposed to you in November that you took action on. And so if you're wanting to go in and have conversations about the facility master plan, we provided some dates that are available for you to do that. If you would do it earlier on, the better. If there are adjustments that you would like to see in the final stages of that plan, I would suggest that be done early on so that we could respond to that in some way and say yes or no, or yeah, it could look this way or whatever, so we can still make that May 8th deadline when we get out the very end that, okay, we can do this moving forward. So there's opportunity in here in March and April for you to have those discussions. The earlier the better.
Maybe the best thing is to add it to our next work session, which we only have one meeting in March, I think. So that leaves us one meeting before we hit April 10th. So that might be the best way to proceed.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate the work on that schedule. Moving on to Appendix 9.
Yep, and this will be quick. We have 5 projects with 5 approval requests. First one is athletic field step 8 change request for the Liberty High softball practice field, which is at Van Allen. And we actually have a deduct or a credit for $2,244 for work that the contractor didn't perform that we might have done in-house or just didn't deem necessary. So it's actually a credit. At Liberty High Phase 2, the athletic venues, Step 7 is award a contract. A couple weeks ago, we took 6 bids for that project. We were hoping to get 7 or 8, but 6 was good. And they ranged from $11,999,000 to $13,834,900. Our project budget is $12,543,000. So we're recommending that you take the base bid. This is for Larson Construction. They were the low bidder. And by the way, Larson is the one that's doing Longfellow and did Alexander and Hoover East. So it's that contractor. They have a real advantage over other contractors. They have their own heavy equipment, grading equipment, and that type of stuff. They have their own concrete crews. And this is a lot of grading and a lot of concrete. So they have a distinct advantage. Anyway, the base bid with alternate number 5, which is the solar cells for the bus office building. We said we wanted to try that pilot project there, so we're going to include that. But then also alternate number 7, which is omit the west parking lot of $550,000, which makes a contract total of $11,518,000. That gives us a comfort level with our contingency that we're not over budget when we're done. We can always go back and add that parking lot. They don't need that right away. It's something that can be added later. So we're recommending that you award the contract $11,518,000 with those 2 alternates. Liberty High Phase 1, we're in the process of really trying to clean up all the documents and all the owner manuals and trainings and things like that. And it's a big task. It takes a while. But we picked up a few changes that needed to be done. There was some code changes at the end of the project where we had to add some gas shutoff valves. And then the district requested moving some mirrors and outlets in the wellness room from one wall to the other that incurred some cost. So that changes for $10,258. And then we have the roof management program bid package 2, which is the press box and softball press box, the football press box and the softball press box at West High. We've been renovating those. Those buildings, we found some really rotten materials in there. We've had a couple changes already to buy new materials. We didn't really know what we had till we took all the old siding off. So we requested some additional trim pieces, so that's an additional $2,652. And then at West High School, the kitchen equipment package, which is a little less than $1 million, we're requesting a change there. And again, that's a deduct or a credit to the district for $2,142. And Allison, our food service director, decided that we didn't need the same the refrigeration equipment that was specified. This didn't have a pass-through that was required, so we can actually save some money. With that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
I move that we approve Appendix 9 requests as presented.
Second.
Comments, questions? Kim, let's vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you. So we're on to the pulled consent agenda item number 9.
So I pulled this item after talking with Les about it, and then just let him just go over it.
The district has been reviewing our enrollment process and for all of our benefits, and our insurance consultant came back to us with 2 options for us to consider. Both quotes are included in your packet. We reviewed both of those, a group of people from our office, and what those would do for our staff as well as for the benefit of the employees across the district in that enrollment. When we first looked at it, Benefit Connect was a significant advantage, and I made that recommendation to you. Late last week, the other company came back and had pushed their pencil a little bit harder and was doing more work with True North, our consultant, and reduced their cost to virtually the same thing within a couple $100 of the Benefit Connect package. But they have 2 significant pieces of their program that improve the product and make those a couple $100 well worth it. And so I would like to change the recommendation to the Benefits Passport. The process and the timeline for either company would be exactly the same in terms of implementation and when we would roll it out to our employees and to our staff. The difference being the cost reduction in Benefits Passport. Those 2 things that are really the kicker that make this a better deal is that they have a 24/7 helpline. So if an employee is doing their enrollment at the convenience of their own time at 8 o'clock in the evening and they run into an obstacle or a question, they can call. Otherwise, they would have to wait until the next day when they could reach a district staff person to ask that question. The other one is it provides electronic notifications that are done through the system to employees to remind them to do it, and only those employees who haven't enrolled will get that, and not all 1,800 or 1,900 employees will get a message saying you need to complete your enrollment process when a fair amount of them have already taken that action. So, and it then provides some reports back to us as a management team about the enrollment, where it's at, and if there's anything that we need to do from our perspective. So those are all built-in portions of the Benefits Passport that does make that a much better value now that they have adjusted their price to us, and it's a 3-year price guarantee.
I move that we approve the online electronic benefit enrollment system Benefits Passport by True North.
I'll second that.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is agenda setting. We've got an education committee on January 30th at Tate High School, where the topics are PBIS Tier 1 and Tate PBIS. Any comments or questions on that committee? The next is the board meeting on the 13th. Where we've got, it looks like standard activity with post-secondary readiness report coming on teaching and learning, transportation update under operational work of the quarterly financial report that Craig referenced earlier. Any other requests for agenda items or ideas for agenda items?
Well, I've got one, I kind of suggested it when we were going through on the test results. A discussion on strategies going forward with that, just fleshing out a little bit on that, opportunities that we may have. And also discussion on cell phones in the school. And I was at Northwest on Friday last week, and they're just, we've got to have a discussion. I don't know if that discussion would be better at a work session or agenda item on a board agenda. I'm open to a discussion on that, but we've got to have a discussion on that.
We covered that somewhat last year in policy and governance.
Well, we had the policy, but we have, we've got a real problem with that technology in our schools. I think we have to have a discussion on if we have to go further than that and ban them in the buildings.
Right.
I'd suggest that go on a work session,
Yeah.
if we're gonna.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that we'd be ready in February. I mean, I think we need to put this on a
Okay.
list of agenda
That's-
items for
that's
work
why-
sessions, and as we look at our planning for what those would be, we'll get that on the list. I mean, I think having this backlog of items that we want to get to, and we just schedule them when we've got
Well,
the time.
yeah, but I think it's one that, you know, we need to really, it's causing disturbances and fights, and I think we need to address it.
And just as a reference, before that time that it comes up, if you go back and listen to our policy and governance meeting minutes, it will be helpful for
Okay.
some background on what we did cover there.
I think that's good, and I think we would want to also consider what sort of information we want to have is to help seed that conversation. So background, but then is there any other data that we want to look at? Okay. Well, I missed your first one, Phil?
Well, for a more, just more discussion on opportunities, what we're going to do going forward with the data that we received in our test results this evening.
Okay. All right, any other suggestions?
Would that be best covered at an education committee?
Could easily be done there.
I'm wondering
And
if maybe
it's-
that'd
and
be
if
better
it's
for
too
the,
soon to put it on the
not for January
13th.
30th, but the following one. That gives you some time as well? Yeah, and then our teachers are involved as well. Yeah.
I think that's good.
One
Okay.
more thing, maybe a placeholder. We've got a policy and governance meeting on the 6th, and there's at least Appendix 2 that you had asked about.
Yeah.
So there may be some items that come from P&G that may need to be discussed, so placeholder if we get
Yeah, an
went
update
through
from
it.
P&G, and if we need it, we've got it there. That's good. Thanks, Paul. All right, and then we've got a work session on the 13th. I think that's a continuation of the work on our boundary activity with Christine Grant. I think that's an update based on the progress to date. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think we were going to add the FMP discussion to that work session. Was that a different work session? Did we want to do that in March? Probably the sooner the better. It's up to you. I would say our agenda is fairly light for that night, so it might be a good time to do it.
That seems reasonable, so that we start having these conversations. Yeah?
Does that fit what you guys think for timeline?
I guess
Too soon?
the only reason that I would be hesitant is because the last time that we voted on this, there was a lot of discussion that you guys wanted to have the student potential analysis report, and if we don't have that report,
I'm kind of a little bit there too. I mean, I'm happy to have it on the agenda for a work session, but I just want to make sure that it's productive and we've got the information that we need to further our thought process and thinking and analysis on this. So if there's no new data,
I was going to say what Paul said, is that if we're waiting for that report to really tell us anything, we could say all the stuff we've said already again. But
That's a good point. I had forgotten that. Thank you, Paul.
okay, so no FMP discussion on the 13th. We'll do the grant boundary activity update. Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Kim? I guess we say all in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
It's not bad considering.